Hey everybody, Brent with Mission Spec here. Back in 2011, I wrote an article about dry fire practice. And to this day, that article is one of the #1 traffic generating assets on the Mission Spec website. So some people over the years have suggested that I make a video about it just because it's easier to share on social media and things like that. So if you've already read the article, this video is really just going to be the exact same thing. But what we're going to talk about is what is dry fire practice, how do you do it, and why is it so important? Okay, first things first, we want to make sure we keep it safe. So no magazine, no round in the chamber. If this is a weapon that's normally loaded, keep that magazine or those rounds out of your reach. Some people say that you even need to have them out of the room just so there's no accidents. It's up to you what level you want to take it to. I just prefer that it's completely out of my reach. The reason for this is your habits or your autonomic systems are a very powerful thing. And if you were to get distracted or something, it'd be very easy to pick up those rounds, especially if you had them on your person, and load your weapon and make it ready, and then you're trying to dry fire with a live weapon. Back in 2011, when I originally wrote the article, dry fire practice was almost a secret. There were very few people doing it outside of competition, and there were even fewer people that understood really why you did it and what it did for you. These days it's different. A lot more people are looking this stuff up, and that's a great thing because it is literally the most important thing when you're training for accuracy. So what is a dry fire? Dry fire is taking your fully functioning weapon without any rounds and then applying slow, steady pressure to the rear of the trigger until it breaks. That's your dry fire. Now before you go dry firing your weapon, you might want to make sure that that's not going to harm your weapon. It's pretty much accepted that rimfire cartridges like the 22s, you're not supposed to dry fire those without snap caps. They make snap caps in pretty much every caliber, which if you don't know what they are, they're just fake bullets that you can chamber, and when you break the trigger, nothing happens. I shoot mostly Glocks. I've got hundreds of thousands of dry fire repetitions through Glocks and never had a single problem. But if you're worried about it, check with your manufacturer. You can always go get a snap cap to do this. Okay, so what are we trying to fix here? The key word is anticipation, and you've probably heard that before, but say you're at the range and you're firing live rounds. Every time you break the trigger, the gun recoils and there's a loud bang. Your subconscious then effectively records that and learns to anticipate that loud bang. So because you're so smart, or your subconscious is so smart, it tries to help you by anticipating the loud bang. So what will happen is you're actually going to, for 99% of the people, push forward to try to counteract the recoil. It sounds like a good idea. The problem is your reflexes will never be as fast as this chemical explosion. You're not going to win that fight. So what you have to do is train your mind or your subconscious to not anticipate that bang. So how do you retrain yourself not to anticipate the shot? Dry fire practice. Every iteration of dry fire practice that I have is retraining my subconscious to not anticipate the shot. Whichever one I do more, dry fire or live fire, is going to be what my mind defaults to. It's one of those strange, non-intuitive things where every real shot that I take actually makes me a little bit worse of a shooter when it comes to accuracy. Every simulated shot or dry fire shot that I take actually makes me a little bit more accurate. The accepted ratio that I've heard from expert shooters is usually that 90 to 95% of your shooting should be dry. Personally, my training regimen is that I dry fire 100 rounds every night. Now, sometimes I don't get to it and I miss it, just like sometimes I miss going to the gym. Now, I know that if I don't say this, the comments are going to be full of people saying, if you ever have to use your weapon in a real situation, the guy on the other side of the barrel isn't going to give you a couple minutes to run a few dry fire rounds. Well, of course that's true, but it's not exactly accurate, because if I dry fire 100 rounds every night, and if I ever have to use my weapon for real, the last thing I always did was dry fire. So that's what my mind is geared towards. I'm in dry fire mode, which is what you want to be for that supreme accuracy. Okay, so how can you tell if your dry fire practice is working if you're not at the range? If you have a normal sight setup or a standard sight setup, you have two sight posts in the back and one in the front. And when you break that trigger, you'll notice that the sight posts will move a little independent of each other, the front and the rear. What I propose is that you dry fire practice until those three posts become rock solid when you break the trigger. So it'll be more like that. There shouldn't be really any visible movement between the front and the rear sights when the trigger breaks, other than just the normal very small shake of the hand that you just can't get rid of course. When you get to that point where it's rock solid, and if it may only take 10 or 12 dry fires, but when you get to that point, if you're at the range and you load live rounds, I guarantee you that next shot is going to be one of the most accurate shots you've ever seen, and the next shot's going to be right on top of it. Now, it's downhill from there, because if you only took 10 shots to get to that point, 10 dry fires to get to that point, it's going to go away very quickly because your brain is going to be retrained really fast. Dry fire practice is never over. I've taught the dry fire technique to what seems like a countless number of people in the past, and I've often run into people who are usually type A, or they think they're type A, where they think they've reached a level of proficiency that's beyond the need of dry fire. And let me tell you, that does not exist. You have to dry fire more than you live fire if you want to maintain the supreme accuracy. Now, these people that don't believe they need to dry fire, I usually find that they're somewhat frustrated because they've kind of hit a plateau, because they've learned over time, whether they know it or not, to make the best of their anticipation handicap. The problem is you're never going to get better than not anticipating the shot. So the way that I always prove it to them, and this isn't my technique, and this has been done for forever as far as I know, is to take their magazine, and then you load it with a few rounds, and then you hide a snap cap in there somewhere. Something that, if you don't have a snap cap, you can use like an empty shell or something like that. Give it back to them, they load it, and they'll go to fire, and they'll, it'll bang, it'll recoil, bang, it'll recoil, bang, it'll recoil, and they'll hit that snap cap, and you'll just see them dive like that. And when that happens, it's like a light bulb goes off for them. They cannot believe that it's happened, that they've been basically suffering from this the entire time. Now, of course, there are always some people who just will not believe you or won't take it to heart. And I feel like that's where you can kind of draw a line through the community. On one side, you have the people that like shooting, and on the other side, you have the people that study shooting. And I'll let you guess which side is larger. So that's dry fire, and that's why it's so important. Now, like I said in the beginning of the video, this has become more prevalent today. It's still not where it needs to be. In my opinion, after the safety brief of an introductory class, the very first thing you should learn should be dry fire. I don't know why it isn't that way. But share this video out. We need this information out there. Every year there are more and more concealed carry holders in the United States, and we need them all to be supremely accurate. Because once you pull the trigger, no amount of thought in the world is going to bring what I call a supersonic liability back, and it needs to be as accurately as possible. So keep up the dry fire practice.